It's one of the most negative things I've ever heard. But division is part of the world in which we live. You get two people together and just set your watch until they disagree with each other about something. There's got to be something deeper in this gospel. In the first reading, we heard about Jeremiah the prophet, who was rewarded for his fulfilling the prophecy that he was sent to deliver. What did they do with him? They put him in the well, and he is the first stick in the mud in history. That was the gift that he received. And Paul preached what he had received from God. And what happened to that Jew, who was a very faithful Jew, as he turned to Christ, they rejected him. And so we come to the theme in the gospel, and I love the way we go down that list. And we not only cover the family, but everyone knows that if trouble is going to come into our family, it's going to be the in-laws or outlaws that do it. Many of us have been astounded with the gift of Pope Francis, who gathered millions of young people from across the world to listen to him and learn. Francis doesn't seem able to keep his mouth shut either. For in one of those talks, he turned to the young people and he talks about the world, and he suggested that the church that we have, young people should make a mess of it, to change it. And we are given that same command. If the greeters would have the camera in their pocket out and start snapping a picture of those that come in, and then show it to them. We have difficulty dealing with joy. And the gospel talks about struggles in families. I was persecuted all my young life. I had 3 sisters. They blamed everything on me. And so at a very early age, I learned that I had to confess the sins that I had committed to my father. And as he would come home from work at Alcoa, he would take his hat off and throw it in and say, "Aggie, can I come in?" And she would say, "Sure." And he'd come in the door and he'd say, "I don't know what it is that I've done wrong, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Can I stay for dinner?" When I did something wrong and had to confess to my father, he gave me a terrible, terrible penance. He'd say, "All right, Jack, I forgive you. Now go and kiss your sisters." As we grow up and try and deal with forming a family, a loving community that is there for someone else, it is very difficult. And to be faithful to the blazing fire of the gift of the love of the Holy Spirit, to share it is most difficult, because the world is not what it once was. It is constantly evolving. And in our time in history, we are called to listen to Jeremiah, to Paul, and to Jesus, and to try and change the world, and to realize we have the power of reconciling those among us. Forgiveness is something difficult to ask for. It is difficult to give, and sometimes it is very difficult to receive. And we will not change, even ourselves, let alone the whole world, quickly. But unless we begin to realize each of us has a power to profess faith of love and forgiveness to someone around us. And it was always very easy for me to be nice to my friends outside the house. But to come back home and to continue to have a smile on my face was very often difficult. My father taught me a lesson that took a lifetime to learn. When I would try and come in the door with a face like that, he would be at the door. He'd grab me by the neck, he'd throw me out the door and slam the door. Often it was cold. And so I'd change my face and knock on the door, and he'd open it. Now you can come in. You look like you belong to this family. And there were times when I couldn't change my face quickly, but on cold days, my heart pushed me, and I was able to begin to be part of the family, because he taught us that we not only had to love each other while we were at home, but when we left the house, to set the example of loving care for others. Otherwise, we would insult the family. And I suspect if we looked around and see the families here today, I'm sure none of you ever had difficulty fighting with each other. And forgiveness was always easy to forgive. In order to help us to change the world, I think we need to do something today. But all the young people who have ever fought with a brother or sister